what's wrong with him? There's something wrong with him. How dare he? Or like, I don't go to that kind of place because of recovery. My initial thing, and it's not to absolve whatever the thing was, right? It's not like it's automatically forgiven.
There's a great saying that I love. All of a man's problems derive from his inability to sit quietly in a room. I love that, right? Because usually if I'm in some sort of jam, it's something that I said.
This is the human experience, and I know something that a lot of other people don't. Something outside of us prompts us and moves us in the direction of getting help, despite the fact that we don't necessarily want it, we don't feel like we need it, we don't think we have a problem, and we weren't necessarily ready to stop. Welcome to the Why Intervention Podcast. I am your host, Christopher Doyle, today joined by Danny Klein. Hello, Danny.
Christopher, how are you?
Great. Once again, here. This is an exciting day for us, or an exciting day for me anyway. This would be a good episode. I decided to do something special because I'm celebrating 18 years of sobriety. Can you believe 18 years?
No, I can't. That is a large number.
It is. I mean, it does seem kind of surreal to say 18. That's like 2 away from 20.
Yeah.
That's like really crazy. A crazy number. And I know that
I don't know. To me, it's very like when you put the age with the 18, like it's all just, like you said, use the word surreal. And it also goes to show time just flies. I remember sitting in meetings with you 10 years, you know what I mean? Maybe some single digits, and here we are at 18.
Right. It is pretty wild to see how far we've come. And yeah, I'm 41 years old. And so initially got sober at 17 and then mostly stayed sober from 17 to 23. But thankfully it's stuck this time, or at least it's stayed stuck for at least 18 years now. So that's pretty good. So what I thought the idea would be here for tonight is to just share what are 18 subtle gifts of sobriety, like 18 unexpected gifts, 18 things that have happened for me as a result of being in recovery and being sober and working a program of recovery that I wouldn't have even known to ask for. I wouldn't have known that I would have wanted this. And I certainly didn't know that this was coming, right? Like, so totally unexpected. And so I don't want it to be, obviously it could be very easy to just go to like kind of tangible things and practical and say like, I'm so happy that I have my wife and my kids and was gainfully employed in a job that I loved and started a business and do something that I love to do today and all of that stuff. And that's all very true, but that's the obvious stuff. And I don't know, so obviously we're talking to the families of anybody who's struggling with addiction. And I want this to be something that maybe you're going to use as insight into what's possible. But again, this is going to be also like a kind of sober focused episode so that if anybody is in recovery, like they can maybe identify with some of the stuff and they can say, oh yeah, that is interesting. That happened for me too. Or maybe that's going to be something that's coming or something that is desirable or something that they can work towards. And maybe if you're a family member, you're going to be able to maybe play this episode and see if it creates some intrigue, but likely not, because as we talk about, in order for somebody to really stay sober and to work these kinds of things, they got to get sober first. And getting sober is something that somebody who struggles with addiction, who is in active addiction, isn't something they're likely to do on their own. And that's where you come in as a family member. So these gifts that I'm sharing and why I think that this is cool is just that this is kind of like the stuff that you're not going to find in your standard Google search or anything like that.
I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, I didn't know they were coming, but I came up with 18 of them, and I think that the first one is kind of cool. So the first one is I can keep my mouth shut. It's a subtle gift, but I do not have to open my mouth because I have a great idea, or I think that I can solve your problem, or I can see what's going on in this whole situation, and I had the whole thing pegged. Like my wife's niece, Kirsten, she was 15 or 16 years old. She's in high school. She had a problem with like one of her close friends at the time. and I was driving her somewhere. She was in the back seat. She's explaining this whole problem. Now she's talking to Julie. She's not talking to me. Julie's asking her about what's going on in school. I'm just driving, right? I'm just on the highway. I'm listening. She's talking about this problem with a friend of hers. And I see the whole thing. When she's going into like, and here's what happened. She spoke to him and this and that and all. And I just see the whole thing, how this thing started, what would fix it, how she could make it right, and she can get what she wants and her friend can get what she wants. I see the whole thing, right? I know like hidden motivations. I see it all, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And she finishes saying like this whole problem. And I go, Kirsten, would you like to see this from an entirely different perspective? And about 5 seconds went by and she said, no. And I went, okay. And just kept driving the car.
Wait, if you don't mind my asking, how old is she?
Well, now she's a grown up. She's in college now. But at the time she was like 15 or 16.
That's a great response. You know what I mean? Like, because like the world, the response that the world expects of you is to say, okay, you know what I mean? And
Right.
she gave an honest, I love that. I would like to meet her one day.
Yeah, she's great. But just the aspect there where she can say no and I can respect that. Now, I don't know. I believe that came from just being around enough people in recovery and hearing people's stories and things like that, and knowing that it doesn't have to all get solved today. I know that so long as you're on the right track and you're sticking around and you have these routines, you're doing these things that are expected of you, you're showing up, you're being at the places, you're around the good people, you're talking, I know that like, okay, they're probably 6 weeks away from getting that lesson. I don't have to like rush it. I don't have to force it. I don't have to impede on anybody's life lessons. And I certainly don't have to make myself like, oh, well, here's my opinion, or that this is the right way, or this is what you should do, or this is how you fix this. I can honor and respect somebody saying, no, I'm not interested, and just, oh, okay, and let it go. Even if I was like really excited I got it. I got an answer for you. I could fix this. I don't have to.
Which is actually really cool. And now that you bring that up, I think about it like in my daily practice, right? That is definitely something that, something that me and you do, right, in our 12-step program of recovery, right, is inventory, where we take a look at ourselves, right? We try and become aware and we learn and we grow. And something that I struggle with, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but it definitely impedes into my life, is that like I have a tough time keeping things open-ended. You know what I mean? Like I need it closed. I need it finished by day's end. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I get a better night's sleep if that chapter is closed. And that is definitely something that I actively in my life have been working on, leaving things as they are at the current moment, as opposed to trying to force my will to get this finished type of deal.
Yeah. So restraint of pen, not having to close all of the loops. Restraint of pen and tongue is one of the phrases that is coming to mind, where you don't have to send the message. You don't have to send the email. You don't have to jump right down somebody's throat on this next thing or whatever it is that's come. And the phrase, does it have to be said? Does it have to be said right now? And does it have to be said by me?
Yes.
And
That's
usually,
up on my fridge. We're a big like phrase on the saying fridge family. That's right over there. Yeah.
that's so funny. That's like the number one. And then you're like, yeah, we got that on the fridge. So
Yeah.
that's not so unexpected, pal. We got it right here.
Yeah. And also it's like when I think about myself, right? Like, especially in the past, right? There's a great saying that I love. All of a man's problems derive from his inability to sit quietly in a room. I love that, right? Because usually if I'm in some sort of jam, it's something that I said.
Yes. And so, right. Perfect. Not only sitting in a room, but just being able to sit quietly, to hear someone,
Yes.
to just actively listen and just hear them out. And I think another thing, and this has come along the way, but it's like asking the question, are you looking for someone to listen, or are you looking for feedback? Asking that question before, even I prompted Kirsten by saying, are you willing to look at this from a completely different perspective? And she was like, no. And I was just willing to accept that. Never brought it up again, and was at peace and ease in doing so. I think that's the big gift, is like, okay, not bothered by that at all. Right?
Because there was a time where I would imagine that your rebuttal to that would have been like, well, you're going to hear it anyway. Like
Of
something
course.
along those.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have prompted it by asking, are you ready to hear this?
Yes, yes.
I
yes.
would have, halfway through her talk, I would have been interjecting and saying, here's what you're doing wrong.
Good point. Good point.
You know what I mean? Like, and so I don't have to do that. Or here's what you got to do. Let me tell you about it. I don't have to step on anybody anymore. You know, I don't speak negatively about people anymore. Like, it's just not a thing that I engage with. And because of that, I find a lot of peace and quiet from that also. And because of that, I guess I can roll it into the third one. I guess they're kind of similar, but it does have, it kind of stands alone, but we'll combine them. That the third one is release from judgment, right? So I'm not gossiping about other people, but I'm also, because of the work we do on ourselves, I am free from judgment of others. And how that happened was because of taking a look at myself and seeing so many instances of me being driven by forces that I was unaware of, right? That how many fears that I was being driven by, and how many desires and ambitions and things, and me wanting my own way and feeling threatened that I'm going to lose something I have, or that I'm not going to get something I want, and all of those various different things. And then, like, what I'm doing and saying in the real world is being impacted by all of these, like, hidden motivations. And I'm unaware of that. And also any of the pain and the suffering and the traumatic incidences and whatever conditions might have happened in my life that, this is how I end up in these types of relationships, or this is how I end up doing this kind of harmful thing to people. I just see when someone does something quote unquote wrong or makes a mistake, my instinct now is not to go direct to what's wrong with this guy, or that was really screwed up, or like, what's wrong with him? There's something wrong with him. How dare he? Or like, I don't go to that kind of place because of recovery. My initial thing, and it's not to absolve whatever the thing was, right? It's not like it's automatically forgiven, or you just like kind of like, it's like whatever it is that they did is not a big deal. And now I'm thinking about something like, that you'd read in the paper of some horrible thing that someone has done, like murdering multiple people or something like that. All I'm saying is my first thought is I feel for the families in a circumstance like that. I feel a sadness, and I feel an empathy, and I feel a compassion for anybody that is going through that kind of suffering for some terrible thing that's happened. But an equal gift, and I really do see it as a gift, is that I think, boy, something either must have happened to that person to do that kind of awful thing, or they're sick in some way. There's some kind of mental illness, some kind of situation that would have that person do that. And so it frees me from a hatred. It frees me from a rage that I don't leap right into judging people. And so because I'm not gossiping about others, and because I don't judge people like that, another wonderful benefit that comes from that is that I don't feel judged. What other people say about me is none of my business. And I'm very comfortable with that. I just don't feel judged by other people. So as soon as I stopped having that running dialogue in my head of just being critical of everybody that I was seeing, just moving around, driving around, like when I was in New York and like taking the train and being on the subway and just like, look at this guy, look at her, what is going on here? Like, that whole dialogue just doesn't exist in my brain anymore, because I'm just and this is, again, it's like a gift of sobriety. It's not like something I like worked for. It's like all of a sudden I just discovered, hey, I don't have that conversation going on in my head anymore.
And I'm thinking about this, and I don't know why this sticks out to me. I've always remembered this, where it's like one of those instances that you remember, and I really, the reason why I bring it up is because I don't remember many things. but I was probably like 2 or 3 years sober. I was in one of those periods of my life where my behavior was very important to me, right? The change in behavior was very important to me. And I remember I was out with a group of friends. We probably went to lunch, something along those lines, right? And I gossiped. I said, I don't remember the exact what took place, but I said something negative about someone that wasn't there. And it really bothered me. And I got home, got back to my apartment at the time, and I called you. And I explained to you the situation. And your exact feedback was, I think you could tell where I was at, where I was using it as like I was really beating myself up over the behavior. You know what I mean? Like I was striving to be perfect. And I think you could tell that, right? Like I was striving for this perfection thing that was just never going to happen, right? And your rebuttal to it was, your mouth, your words have such a positive when it comes to helping other people, right? That I think you need to just accept that sometimes there might be some negative involved there too. You know what I mean? Like where you used it as this self type of lesson. You know what I mean? Because I was just so, I think at the time I was so headstrong on being this like 100% mistake-free person, and it was just never going to happen, right? And I remember when I had brought to the youth this, and the reason why I called you on it was because gossiping was something that was showing up in my life way more than I wanted to. It wasn't just this one time at lunch, right? It was a buildup that made me call you. And I remember being so, I guess, taken aback by your rebuttal because it was something that I didn't see. It was something I didn't see coming. You know what I mean? Where you said, it wasn't your normal, like, don't do this or don't do that. Or it was just accept that sometimes this stuff is going to happen. It was more along those lines. And I thought that was great in regards to the space that we were in at that moment.
Perfection is not possible. We're striving for it. And then to see those moments comparatively to how we used to be, to just have these like little pops here and there where, oh, there's an old moment of gossip. What's amazing is that you're even monitoring this, that you're attempting to get better at this, and how much better you've gotten and how improved, so that here's this one-off and you're beating yourself up over it. Look how far you've come.
Yeah. It's and for me and you were talking earlier about like how time really is flying. If you look at that 18 next to 18 years for you, when I made this phone call to you 7 or 8 years ago, right? Like that was such a prevalent thing in my life at the time, trying to work on this behavior. And here we are, fast forward 7, 8 years, later, like that's something that doesn't even really come to my mind because it doesn't happen anymore. You know what I mean? It's just something that's kind of basic, not fully, but basically been eliminated because it's just not something that is part of my life anymore.
Yeah. And that's because you took those actions at the time.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. And so there's that consistency and that discipline to be on top of something, to want to change, strive for it. And now look, years later, it's just not that big of an issue anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing I have here is like I can love people and accept people, which maybe it goes a little bit towards the non-judgmental also. But I feel, again, it's kind of stands alone. It's its own thing probably because of the forgiveness of myself for a lot of the mistakes, and what on paper, when you do this kind of the inventory work we do and this self-examination, it's not like inventory work is like recovery exclusive. You can go back to Socrates, who says the unexamined life is not worth living, So within the recovery framework that we have, there's this self-examination process. And because we do that as part of it, again, kind of coming to terms with my own, like what's driving the selfishness, what's driving the lies, the dishonesty, what's driving these fears, where these fears come from, and where is all this anger and resentment coming from. And to be able to get to kind of the roots of those, and then to trust this process, have those roots get uprooted. And that, now you're not, and so then having compassion for myself, which then I guess kind of leads into that idea of like, and so I have compassion for others. And so then where it shows up the worst is like with people who are the closest to me, because that's where I can still be critical, and that's where I could get anger and frustrated. And so it's not to say that those things aren't happening. It's just that I just can love people. I can love them. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to be anything. They don't have to be a certain way. And I'm really grateful that I have that gift, because I can see, because of the work we do, a lot of times, like, there's parents who are struggling with their children who are in active addiction. And a lot of the shifting the dynamic of the relationship is going to be, you're going to have to find the things that you love and that you are grateful for about your child again. You're going to have to go back and tap into this kid that they were before all of this active addiction stuff started to happen. And more importantly, maybe than anything, is that you have to see this as they are struggling with an active addiction. It's not them, it's the addiction. And if you can separate the addiction from your child, and even like an exercise I've given many parents is, give me 3 things that you love about them, and give me 3 things that you're grateful for about them, and do that every day. And come up with new things. They have to be major things. They don't have to be big things. In fact, the small things is wonderful. Like even just small little things. I mean, but you come up with those and your energy is going to shift, right? And so as you begin to shift the dynamic in that way, I was getting to with that before, is like you can see how sometimes the expectations that parents will have will impact their child, right? And the expectations that we have on people in general makes an impact, and people can feel that you have these, he should be, she shouldn't do this, and all of these shoulds that we have across so many different categories, that it creates a lot of problems for us. And so if we begin to, the way in for that for me was to take a look at that on all of my shoulds. Where is that coming from? Where is that dialogue coming from? Where's the, like, you should be here by now. You should be this successful by now. You should be this whatever by now. Like, or anything that I have as kind of like these deep-seated beliefs or these deep-seated expectations that I've never examined, because, like, well, if I was in active addiction, I'm drinking over those. My solution to those was to get drunk or to get high. So now in recovery, we can examine all of that, we can uproot all of that, and in so doing, find compassion for ourselves, and then by extension, you can see it happening to oodles of people around you. And you just kind of have this empathy that, like, this is the human experience, and I know something that a lot of other people don't. And I have access to something that perhaps they don't have access to. They wouldn't even know that this program exists. But I mean, I would put a plug in here that there's over 250 12-step based fellowships. So if you don't belong to one, and if you were to work with us, like, we're going to recommend one. I can tell you that.
I love how you bring up the expectations. One of the gifts, so to speak, for me is that I have the privilege to be able to coach 8th grade basketball, and you get to see it. So you use that word expectations, right? That is such a make or break type thing. And when I talk about it like that, what I mean is I see a lot of parents, right, that are heavily involved with their kids' basketball, and sometimes they have these very high, tough, stringent expectations of their children. And it's just funny how it works. Like, it's make or break. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you'll see a kid react very positively to it in regards to that they are striving, they are working very hard to meet these expectations and to make their parents proud, right? That's a great thing to see, right? But more times than not, what I'm seeing today with the 8th grade 13-year-old child today is more of a situation where it kind of breaks them, where they kind of curl up in a ball to the challenge and run away from it and are so fearful of letting down their parents or the people around them that the expectations make them scared. You know what I mean? So I get to see it from these two different angles, and I look at it as a make or break type situation.
And so imagine how much better. And again, like, I didn't have access to this, and I was one of those kids. I was an 8th grader with those types of expectations and feeling the expectations of imaginary others. Like, I was a legend in my own mind, right? So like the expectations of an entire community on my back, thinking I have to be the best at what I do on this court. But imagine that, and this is the balance, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be happening at this age, right? I mean, hopefully it would be, that you are unconditionally loved no matter what happens out there on that court. All we care is, like, we want you to be happy. We want you to give it, to be your best and to do your best because it's important to you, that it's special for you, that it's character building for you, that this is important for you. That's why you're doing this, right? Whether you win or lose, whether you score 5 points or 50 points or whatever happens out there, our love isn't based on that. We love you just because.
Yep.
And so you can have all the expectations and everything that you want, but at the same time, and know that two things are true there, right? Like, we expect great things because you're great and we know that you can do great and you can be even better, and that's wonderful. And we love you just because.
Yes.
And I didn't know that. I didn't have that kind of feeling, I don't think, when growing up necessarily. And not that I didn't feel loved. I just don't think that I didn't have attachments to the expectations, right? That the results is what provides your value. Yes. Your self-worth is being driven by the expectations that you meet. And that's not true.
Yep.
But a lot of people are operating that way. I certainly was for a while. And so now that I see that, and I've seen that for myself, I don't have that with my kids and with others. So
and I
that's
think
a gift.
I also do think as a cultural, or where we're at today, we've moved away from that spot, which I think is a good thing, of everything is results-driven business, right? Like it's either you did this or you failed, right? Like, and I feel like that was very prevalent when I was growing up, and it's not as prevalent today. And I consider that to be a good thing in regards to growing as a 13. When you're talking to a 13-year-old, right? Like it's way more than just basketball, right? You want to try to help them grow as a human, right? And I think we've moved past that results-driven business when it comes to expectations, and that is a good thing. I'm saying that as that's a positive, you know what I mean? There's just so much more to this than just that.
Right. So gift number 5 is I'm free from self-created crises in my life. I'm no longer creating tangible messes in my world. Self-inflicted. Is it never happening? I'm not saying like it's never ever happening. I'm sure there are these moments where they're happening and now and again, but it used to be my life. My whole life was just kind of one big self-inflicted mess.
Yes.
Right? So what I have gained as a gift from being in recovery is that my troubles were of my own making. Having that understanding then provides this hope of like, oh, well, if I'm the one that's creating my problems, I can get to the inner workings of how it is I create all this self-inflicted crisis, and I can not do that anymore. I could let go of doing that. And so for the vast majority of my problems were not coming at me, they were coming from me. So the recognition of that, and then to get to like the bones of it all, to go like, and this is how that happens. I don't create the kinds of problems, but like, emotionally, in relationships, in business. In business is probably my biggest challenge, and raising kids is probably my biggest challenge. But a lot of those other categories of my life, I'm not creating these self-inflicted crises anymore because of the gift of seeing that they're coming from me.
Yeah. And when I think of that self-inflicted crisis, right? Like if I'm in a jam these days, it's usually of my own making, right? But the way that I look at it is like the scale has been lowered so much. Like any problem that I used to have of my own making was this huge, big crisis that was all encompassing, took over the world. And usually like the ripple effect affected family members and everything, right? Now, if I have a problem in my life, it's usually on a pretty small scale because it's just, we're not making mistakes like that anymore. We're not causing problems anymore. We're not doing the things that we used to do that made these grand scale type of issues in our lives. Now everything is done on a much smaller scale, which is obviously a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Number 6 for me is I no longer make myself wrong for a feeling or a thought.
Mhm.
I do not identify myself as whatever the thought or the feeling is that's coming across my desk at this very moment, right? And the desk of my mind. That if a thought or a feeling would happen, I would attach to it, and then I would make myself a bad person because I just had that thought, right? How could I be thinking this right now?
Yes.
After
yes,
everything
yes.
that's happened, how could I be thinking about taking a drink right now? Or how could I be thinking about, like, how am I going to make this relationship work? I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Any of those types of thoughts and those feelings that may come, I'm in a more observant position. I don't attach to any of them and make myself wrong for having them. I don't feel any shame because a thought comes in anymore, because it just as soon as it comes, it likely goes.
And I'm fully aware that I have absolutely no control over my thoughts. I only have control over how I react to my thoughts.
Mhm.
That's like, I love that you brought that up, right? Because I used to really judge myself on my thoughts to where that is like the furthest thing from how I behave these days. Because I'm just, like I said, I'm fully aware that of the initial thought that pops into my brain, I have little to no control over that. What I do have control over is how I react to it, that's the part that I'm looking at.
Sometimes.
Well, I'm going to react to it. Positive or negative reaction, still withstanding.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that the gift there is just not making it mine, right? To be able to detach from a thought or to detach from a feeling, to separate from it, to say, it's not my thought. It's just a thought.
Yep,
It's
I got
just
you.
a feeling, and feelings pass. Feelings come and go. And so this will pass. And I don't make it mine. And then because I'm not making it mine, then I can't then make myself wrong for it, and blame myself or feel shame about it. It's just a thought. It's just a feeling.
I love that. I love that you're not, because we have this, right? People like us have this amazing ability to personalize everything, right?
Right.
So to be able to detach the thought as more of just a thought as opposed to our thought is a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. So this, is certainly a gift of recovery. I wouldn't have any chance at getting anywhere near close to this if it wasn't for the fact that I'm sober. But the power to, and let's just say the gift of transformation, the gift to know that transformation is powerful, that I know that I can change a situation. I can change my circumstances. I can change the way that this is going. I can influence my life like I have. So in the serenity prayer, where it's God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. It took me over 10 years to get to asking for courage to change the stuff that I might be able to make an impact on, right? But now, because of experience, I know that I have like tangible proof of that experience, that I know that's actually something that's possible, that if I like the magnifying glass in the sun, and it hits it and like boom, like it's focused energy that I can focus on doing something and or changing something and can make it happen. Again, and it's not Chris Doyle that's making it happen. It's that gift of recovery, that power that I've like tapped into, that I've been able to see that think of like the biggest transformation of them all is I don't drink or do drugs anymore.
Yep.
And so the fact that happened as a result of doing this, it's like, well, I can apply these same types of principles and this same stuff to asking for the courage to change the things that I can, and then watch what happens.
As you go through this list, and as you just touched on transformation, I thought of a couple of months back, a mutual friend of ours, our good buddy Jay, he closed out his anniversary with this great line that I love so much. I'm going to read it. I got it right here. I've accomplished nothing, but have been gifted everything. I love that. He was looking back on his 20-something, I think he was celebrating 28 years, if I'm correct. And to sum up that 28-year period, he said, I've accomplished nothing, but have been gifted everything. And I love that because these are all gifts as opposed to like personal things that I went out and did myself, right?
Yeah. That's another astounding number. Is JR with 28 years.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, his buddy Joe just celebrated 30.
That's wild. That's wild. Because when I got sober, there was Joe. Joe was at my first meeting, and he was like, oh, we had this seat. We're saving this seat for you right here. And JR was he was going to be celebrating 4 years when I first got sober. Like, so just to be able to like, just to scope, just the gift of that, to have seen as much as I've seen, to be around these people, like, and the confidence of knowing, man, this program works. Like, so we're two guys that are talking, we're on this podcast, but we are connected to hundreds. And when we say hundreds, I mean hundreds of people that we know firsthand that recovery works for, that are sober. And so we have compounded confidence that recovery works. When I feel undeserving or worthless, I can make people around me feel like they're not worth it to me. They're not worth my time, my energy, my presence. When I feel worthless, I make the closest people to me feel like they're a burden. And if I add self-pity, they become such a burden, I blame them for everything wrong with my life. And that was like something that I kind of tapped into when I was just thinking about being in the throes of it and inactive addiction, and how like that self-centered, just selfish, blaming, manipulative kind of stuff. But then it's like the people around me who get impacted by it, who suffer by it. It's like, so if I feel worthless, like if I feel that kind of way or undeserving or whatever, it's like that's the consequence of that. So today, now I'm filled with this self-worth, again, that isn't based on expectations being met, or because I've done anything, or because I haven't done something, or I'm not doing something. Like, that's not where self-worth is being derived from. And so just knowing that, like, if I start to sway towards being critical about the people who I love the most, who are closest to me, and I start getting into this kind of like blaming kind of thing, I know that I am not feeling good about me. So something is going on with me. It's not them. That's the gift.
What I'm thinking of right now, and we're talking about high numbers, right? The great Debbie Doyle coming up on 50 years sober, right? I remember I had just moved back to Rockaway. I was in a meeting with your mother, and we're in the 12-step fellowship that we go to is Alcoholics Anonymous, and she said this line that I thought was so amazing. She said, victims do not recover in Alcoholics Anonymous. So whenever someone's talking about self-pity or low self-worth or anything along those lines, right, I always go back to that line that I heard her say that I thought was just, at the moment when I heard it, I guess it was one of those times when I really needed to hear it because it's simple, but at the same time, so powerful, right? If I'm in that victim mode, space, I'm not going to recover. I'm not going to move forward, right? I'm going to stay in that spot till I get out of it.
My troubles are of my own making, right? So if I'm in that victim mindset and like everybody is taking advantage of me or that everybody's out to get me, everybody's trying to take advantage of me, if I'm operating from that place, then you can't help but to have people come and take advantage of you or look to walk all over you. And because you're operating from that place where this is the thing that like, and we might have it worse than many people out there in the world, like because we take things to extremes, but ultimately the solution for human suffering is the same for all humans as it is for us. It's just that like our life was threatened. If we didn't do something to change, we were going to die.
Yep.
But the process is to take a look at those self-inflicted crises, like I said, and taking that personal accountability, that personal responsibility. And so I can lead into that. The next gift here is, and this is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, but when I am disturbed, the problem is that I am disturbed, that the disturbance it lies with me. It has nothing to do with the other person or this circumstance. Whatever it is that's happening is triggering something within me that is bothering me. And if I want to be free from that, it has nothing to do with this person or that thing changing. It only has to do with my perception of it, my perspective on it, why it is this bothers me. And there's so much, we could do a total full episode on just this topic for sure, because it really is that special to me. It's one of the most exciting parts of recovery for me, that who knew that this was going to be what happens. And I relapsed a bunch because I didn't get this. And so the fact that I got it now, it goes a long way as to why I'm still here and I'm still sober, because when I am disturbed, the problem is that I'm just not accepting this person or this place or this thing or this situation. I have a problem with it. And so it's not about the thing changing. It's me identifying what about this bothers me. And the gift there is that I have the ability to dive in to those things. I think another gift, now I'm starting to get all crazy. I don't know where I'm at on this list, but doesn't matter.
You might end up at 40.
Who knows? But because of this, there's another gift. It's that not only I can admit when I'm wrong. I used to always have to be right in everything. Every conversation, I just knew everything. Right? Especially when I was younger, like my 16-year-old addicted self, you could not tell me anything, right? I was so...
Make up stuff to be right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would lie my way through winning the argument. So I had to be right. And today, not only can I admit when I'm wrong and look to make it right, but I can get to the heart of why it was I did what I did, right? And typically, that's why I'm bringing it up now, why I did what I did was because I was disturbed by something, right? Something about it bothered me. And because I was bothered, I reacted. I didn't respond well. And so now so now I have the tools to go into what about this thing bothered me. And I can't think of a more powerful tool for today's people. Right, for our culture today, in the year 2025, that if you have a problem, it's you. Like, that's stunning. It's like if you, like, for what is going on in like college campuses today, right? And that like, please don't do this because I feel this kind of way. No, like being able to get into, well, what about this bothers me? Why does this bother me? And if I can get to the heart of it, which I can, and this is that unexpected gift I didn't know was coming, but because of recovery, I'm able to get to the heart of it so that it doesn't bother me anymore. so that when this thing happens again in the future, if it ever does happen again, I'm not bothered. And one of the other, just perspective-wise, there's a reason why it bothers me. There's a reason why something bothers you. And the thing that bothers you might not even be on my top 10 list of things that bothers me. Why is that? Your number one thing that bothers you more than anything in the world might not be in my top 25. There's a reason why it bothers you. And if you can get to the heart of that, which is what's happened for me in recovery, I am free from all of these things that used to bother me so much that no longer do.
I would say that's probably, it's up there with one of the single greatest things that has happened to me in regards to my change of perception, how I view life. You know what I mean? How I take responsibility, how I look forward to almost being wrong so I could learn from the mistake. But basically just basically my change of perception, right? I the way that I view the world and have come to the realization that I'm the problem. I feel like overall, mash all those things together, that's probably the single greatest thing that's happened to me in my recovery, just because it allows me to change. It allowed me to change and become the person that I am today.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite. We'll see if I change by the time we're done.
Yeah.
But I think that it's so important to me, and this will probably bleed into something else, but it's so important to me that, like, I wasn't necessarily, like, I didn't do so well in some romantic relationships in my life. I was someone who fell in love pretty easy, and it would get pretty hot and heavy pretty quick. And then they would be like those relationships would fizzle within 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. But some of them were extended relationships. And the extended relationships didn't work because of not having that ability to get to the heart of these disturbances, and then not being able to, because you're not getting to the heart of the disturbances, you're not able to communicate effectively. And so in that particular category of my life, I would just blow up these relationships. And I had a long-term relationship. I was married at one time, and then now I'm divorced. And that was self-inflicted crisis, right? And it was so that relationship on the surface looks good, but unexamined disturbances within myself. But what does that turn into? I don't feel good about myself. Now I'm blaming her, and the whole situation, it just goes bad, right? But that whole thing, I can look back on and see I'm 100% responsible, right, for the demise of that marriage. Right?
Yes.
And so I have no animosity towards her at all, right? I have no, it's like it was me. I was the problem here. And again, that's a gift of recovery. All of that to say, so freeing and clear, and made all of the amends, made multiple amends, and she friendly with me and no issues, right? But when it came time to get over the fear of, am I ever going to be in a relationship ever again? Right? Being so fearful of diving back into that. So there's two things here. Number one is the gift of the power of transformation, and knowing that if I focus on something, I could actually manifest this in a positive way. And so I wrote down, I had a relationship ideal for the first time ever. And I said, what does a successful relationship look like for me? What are how do I have to show up as a man in this relationship? How do I have to be? What type of person? What kind of qualities do I want in my partner, and all of that sort of stuff? And looking at all those things, getting it down on paper. The single most important thing to me on that list was that I be with someone who understands that when she is disturbed, the problem rests with her. So that she can look at, okay, I know, he just pissed me off. Now I'm going to get to the heart of why it is that bothered me. And I'm not going to be able to be in a successful relationship with someone who doesn't share that value. That the first thing that you're going to do is to blame me and yell at me or scream at me for something that's going on that's bothering you, when I know as a principle a deep-seated principle now that I've seen work over and over again, that problem is coming from me. So before I'm going to talk to you about something that's bothering me, I'm going to get to the heart of why it bothers me. And once I do that, it may not bother me anymore, or the way that I talk to you about it is going to be so much smoother. There's no blame. There's no guilt trips. It's just clear.
You're going into that conversation with like so much less visceral, you know what I mean? Like it's not wartime. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, if you're able to do that whole process that you just explained, right, which is a big part of the process that we go through in regards to our daily lives, that self-evaluation, so to speak, right? If we're able to go through that process and then have that conversation, think pre-Cana. I had to take pre-Cana with my wife, Bridget, right? We took pre-Cana before we were going to get married, and it was during COVID. The guy did the class over Zoom, right? And one of the things that he said to us, he said, make sure you have a joint calendar, right? That was a big one, joint calendar. And then number 2 was, if you are ever in an emotional conversation, table it until there are no more emotions involved, right? And you could just see both of us, my wife and I, being in recovery, right? You see how much sense that makes, right? Like, table it until the emotions are taken out, so you could come at the conversation from a place of intellect and clear thinking and all of that stuff, as opposed to emotions and wartime.
Yeah. Yeah. And not having to be right and not blaming the other person.
All that stuff.
Yeah. And so I'll give you an example since we're here and we're going to wrap up soon. But one of my favorite examples is from a friend of ours. And so his name's Mike. He's got a couple of kids. And I remember him sharing this story with us about when he came home from work, if the place looks like a disaster area, he would be so upset because his wife is home and how come if the place isn't cleaned up and all that sort of stuff. And so, of course, my question to him is, okay, so why does that bother you? And now we're going to begin to make sense of it, right, with an example, because like if you were listening to us, maybe it sounds like this is psychobabble. Like, what are you guys even talking about? And it's like, what do you mean? He's going to look at me like, what are you talking? Did you hear what I just said? The place looks like a disaster. It looks like a bomb hit it. I've been at work all day. I come home. She's been here. She's got the kids. Put a DVD on, clean the house. That's his position, right? Say, okay, yep. But what about that bothers you? I need you to take a look at what bothers you. There's a reason this bothers you so much, right? Other guys can come home and it's not going to bother them at all.
Toy.
Yeah. They're not even going to register it. So what is it about this that bothers you so much? And so he goes through the process of the self-examination and taking a look at what about this bothers him so much. And by the time he gets on the other side of it, it becomes clear to him that the reason this bothers him so much is because of when he was a kid and his father would come home and the place would be a mess. It would turn into a very loud, scary situation. And so what he got really good at when he was a 6-year-old little boy, maybe younger, is I got to clean this whole place up before Daddy gets home. So the thing that's really driving him being bothered is a desire for safety, right? That he wants to feel safe, and he knows if the place is clean that he can feel okay. Now, what do you think happens when he gets to the bottom of that? About 80 to 90% of the bother disappears for the rest of his life. He comes home and he knows exactly why this bothers him. It doesn't even bother him anymore. And if there's a little twinge of it, right? The reason there would be a twinge is because he didn't have a cup, but he would be because he'd have something unresolved around it. But he resolved it because he spoke to his wife. And imagine that communication. I did some reflecting.
I mean,
I realize now the reason why this bothers me so much is because when I was a kid, it was really scary. I didn't feel safe. And that's what's driving that. It has nothing to do with you, honey. I'm sorry I ever made it an issue. I love you, and it won't be a thing anymore. And guess what happens more times than not? The place is clean when he comes home. As just an added, not all the time, but that communication is something you just can't, it's inarguable. Like, it's just wonderful to be able to get to the heart of things like that.
I mean, that's a great story, and it's such like high level work. You know what I mean? Like high level, look at yourself, find stuff out, become aware, and then be able to practically implement it into your life, right? And then not only is your life getting better, your partners is, the kids are, right? There's fights that are being avoided. The whole thing, it improves everything.
Yeah. So another gift is I can say no. I think that's probably underrated, but I can say no without fear of judgment. I can just say no. I have no fear of what other people are going to think or say because I'm saying no to something. Like, that's something that oftentimes people really struggle with. I don't think I might have been able to say no. I might have been better at saying no than some people that really struggle, who are in that typical place where they really can't say no, or they have a very difficult time saying no. I was better than that in my life typically, but I would certainly be plagued by what this person is thinking about me and having said no in that particular situation. And that I'm not bothered by that. I'm free from that judgment.
But that's the whole, for me, that's the whole way. Like, I struggle mightily with that topic that you just brought up there. And a big part of it is not so much now, more, I would say, in the past, that I want to be seen a certain way, right? I want to be seen a certain way as a guy that doesn't say no. You know what I mean? Like that's how he's described. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine in recovery on a bench. I remember exactly where we were, and we spoke about this about 2 years ago, right? And we got to the heart of it. You told that story about Mike. This is a story about me and my buddy, and same exact thing. We got to the heart. I forget even exactly what we were talking about, but the issue at the bottom of it was I didn't want to say no because I cared about what others thought. That's where we got, you know what I mean? So it ended up being a great conversation because I landed on what the issue was.
Yeah. Fear of what other people thought was the number one driving force of my life before I had examined anything, right? It was a surprise to me to discover. Here I was acting or behaving as though I don't give a crap about what anybody thinks about me and all that sort of stuff. But like, everything that I did was driven by the fear of what other people were going to think. What are other people going to say? But imagine like basing your whole life on what you think other people's thoughts are. It's not even their thoughts. It's you thinking what their thoughts are. And so you're just coming up with whatever wild interpretation you can. But when I see the driving force, like where I went to school, who I hung out with, the clothes I wore, the sneakers I bought, who I dated. Is this okay? Is she okay? You know what I'm saying? Is this car okay? It was never just me being okay with what I wanted, or that it's okay to want to wear these sneakers or to go out with this.
And what made all of those thoughts and feelings go away?
That's the gift of recovery. By going through this and
before recovery.
Oh, yeah, no, you just get hammered.
Why, no.
And you don't care.
That's why alcohol and drugs became such a prevalent part of my life, was because I was dominated by all these thoughts and feelings that went away once drugs and alcohol entered my system.
Yeah. And so maybe by extension, but I want to point out this gift, and this is important, is that maybe it goes along with the idea of not being afraid to say no, or not thinking about what other people, if I'm going to say no. But I don't justify what I'm doing. I don't like my life is free from justification, from explanation, from rationalization, from defending. I'm not doing any of that. Like very rarely is it coming up where I'm like in a defensive position where I gotta like, what do you mean? Like I'm really getting it, or that I'm explaining things. And the flip side of that coin, and I really want to say this for family members, like that there's a hope here for you, is that, or at least something to strive for, is you should be free from people in your life where it's just like to be free of explanation, to have some degree of routine and predictability from the people in your life. That my wife doesn't have to explain anything to me. It's just, here's what's happening. I'll be here. Oh, this is this and that. And I'm not like, well, why are you doing that? What do you mean? What about like trying to make sense of anything? It just makes sense. There's no explanation needed. And when I hear parents or family members that we're working with, and they just go into this, well, she said, and then this is what happened, and then this happened, and because of this, it was like, that's why she was late, and then it came over here. And it's like, I don't have those people in my life. So not only am I, the gift is like, I'm not explaining myself to anyone because there's nothing to explain. I'm not making excuses for anything. I'm not trying to like make you hear my case or justify something that I'm doing because there's a predictability to what I do. There's the expectations that we talked about earlier, but this is a different kind of thing where it's just like, if I say I'm going to be there, and if I didn't show up, you know something must have really happened. And even in that scenario, it's even, well, something must have happened. You're not even going to look for an explanation because it would be such a rare occurrence. If I say that I'm going to be there, I'll be there at 8, I'm going to be there at 8. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if something were to happen and I wasn't there, the people wouldn't be looking for an explanation. It would just be like, oh my, like something, you know what I mean? Like, are you okay? Everything's good?
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, so being free from explanation is...
This was my favorite one.
Really?
Yeah. Less is more. Less is more.
I feel like it's so underrated, both sides of it, to not have to explain myself because of just the way that I live my life. And the other side of it, that the relationships I have with people, I don't have anybody around me where I'm getting explanations for stuff.
It's all trust.
Yeah. Everybody is reliable. And that includes like people. So this could seem like it's almost paradoxical, like a direct contradiction to what I just said. But the other gift is the endless amount of patience and tolerance for people who are newly sober.
Which
right?
Is tough.
Yeah. But like, if they're newly sober and they're trying, I have this, it doesn't exist in any other area of my life. Let's just put it this way, right?
Yes.
But in this one particular instance, because of that, if you are newly sober and you are trying, if there's just a little bit of you trying, and then it's just like, I can take all the crazy you got because I just can see myself in it, and it helps me, and it helps me to help them. And I have no problems with it at all. And it could be because I'm not attached to outcomes either.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to be of service. I'm here to help. And yeah, this guy is crazy and he's got 11 days sober, but he's made 11 meetings in 11 days and he's doing what he's got to do. And he's, and okay. And so whatever crazy comes up, it's like, I'm just here for it. And there's nothing like that in my life.
Because my wife is always saying to me, why can't you bring that into the house? Like, I get in trouble for that. You know what I mean? And I don't really have an explanation for it. I guess that's my thing. I was there. You know what I mean? I was there. I felt that I know it. I've been there. And she'll bust my chops about why I can't bring that into the house with the kids and all that other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so that person's insanity is uniquely insane to them. But at the same time, because of where we come from, it is predictable, right? And so it is routine. And so that's why it's not contradictory to kind of what I was saying, that it's like we come to expect it. It is predictable. It is routine. This is a pattern that people go through, and we just kind of have that tolerance and that patience for it. And we can remain kindly and loving towards them. And it is certainly something to strive for in our house, and to be living these principles in everything that we do with everybody. So by extension, and this is something that is really super powerful, but the gift that I got was I have a God-centered certainty that I can be helpful to another alcoholic or another addict. And for a long time, early on in recovery, I didn't have that certainty. I had okay, it's something to do to try and be helpful. And that means go and offer someone a ride or make a phone call or pick up the phone when someone calls you, doing things for others in various different ways. But to have the experience of having someone take the time. My sponsor's name was Richie, and another sponsor I had is Jared. These guys took the time to take me through the process of the 12-step recovery. And because of that, on the other side of it, I just became 100% certain that this is something that I can do with other people. And it launched me out into doing that, right? And so another gift that I'll mention here is that, how do I put this? There's the choice to be helpful to others is not a choice. In the same way that I did not have the choice when I was in active addiction, I didn't have the choice to not drink. I didn't have the choice to not get high. It was gonna happen, even if I didn't want to, right? Because of going through the 12 steps and experiencing this gift of recovery and having the certainty that I can do it. But if you were to ask me, hey, we're going to go, can you come with me and speak at a detox tonight? Let's say. There might be, this second thought might be, I don't feel like doing that. I don't know if I want to do that. But it's almost I don't know how to describe it. As if I've crossed the veil into some other dimension, right? Where it used to be, the thought would be, go get drunk or go get high. And the second thought might be, that's not a good idea. You shouldn't do that. Don't do it. And then I would do it anyway. I would have no ability to prevent it from happening. Now, because I'm sober, the gift is, can you come speak at a detox tonight? Or will you sponsor me? Or can you speak tonight at my anniversary? Or can you do this? Or can you do that? Whatever it might be, my second thought might be, I don't know if I want to do that, or can I do that? Or I don't know. Oftentimes it's not even there, that second thought. But if it is, I'm going to the detox. I'm going to sponsor the guy. I'm going to speak at the anniversary. I'm going to do it, despite if the second thought is a selfish one. It is almost as though I don't have a choice. It's almost inexplicable. How do you explain that? I'm doing the best I can. There's this authentic selflessness that I cannot explain other than to say, that's going to happen. I cannot choose not to do it, almost. The only thing would be if an emergency happens and it didn't wind up happening, fine. But if it's I'm going to say yes. Yes. If it's being presented to me, because I don't have the choice really to say no.
Because of the work that you went through with Richie and Jared, you've been reprogrammed to have a new first thought.
Yeah. Well, I've been reprogrammed to do. So put it this way. I heard Russell Brand say this once. It's if you're not working, a program's working you. Okay. So when I was in active addiction, the program was drink. The program was get high. And if that thought came to mind, I had no defense against it. There was nothing I was going to be able to do about it, despite whatever the second thought or however many thoughts. That would come and I would do it. right? And now it is like a total and complete reversal from that place where even if I were to think to myself, I don't want to do that helpful thing,
You know
I'm
you're
going to
gonna do it.
do it. It's going to
Yeah.
happen. It has nothing to do with me. It is as though the choice has been removed.
Uh-huh.
So it's like I'm either putting my dependence on power greater than myself, and the power greater than me was alcohol, or the power greater than me was cocaine, or I put myself in a power greater than me that is a higher power, some kind of spiritual, universal source connection, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is for you, fine. Doesn't matter, right? Just a higher power. And when I did that, right, so it's still, the process is one of depending on a power,
Uh-huh.
connecting to a power and tapping into it and relying on it. When I relied on alcohol, the consequences were dire, really bad, and I couldn't do anything about it. And over here, when I depend on a higher power in God, and then it's go speak of the detox, I also can't do anything about it, but there aren't any consequences. In fact, there are benefits and
Benefits.
rewards and this ongoing, growing, compounding dividend of spiritual growth and positivity that comes from having done that stuff. Because I just told you earlier, I spoke at one last night, not a detox, I spoke at a sober house, and this guy was just lit up by what I was sharing. He's like, I never heard anybody say anything like this before. So it's like no mistakes that I'm there. I took that on regardless of whether I wanted to do it or not. I was going because someone asked me. And then this guy's like, I want you to be my sponsor.
It's a Sunday night.
Yeah, Sunday night in a snowstorm. And I
You
was
would
there and I want you to be my sponsor. And it was like, okay, here's what I want you to do. And he said, okay. And now we're off and running.
Boom. Look at that. Just to bring up like the past, right? The past compared to the present, right? Like it's Sunday night. You'd think this be the last thing in the world you want to do, right? That's where we were. And now today, and something that, like you said, you don't even have a choice. You get asked, autopilot, you do it, and then the ripple effect, right? You meet somebody, sponsor, they're already partaking in the part of the program that's going to change their life so that they one day could do it with somebody else. Look at like the ripple effect is happening. It's happening. It's going on.
Yeah. And you get to experience whatever joy that is, the euphoria of seeing that effect, that mushrooming effect of it helping other people and then them going on to help other people. It's incredible. And so we only got 2 left. And so one of these here, it's like for sure, I heard about it, but I don't think that I thought it was actually going to be possible for me. I didn't think that it was like maybe going to happen, but I heard about it and people talking about it. And so it's the gift of having the obsession to drink or use drugs be removed. I didn't see that coming, even though they talked about it. And even though I heard some people saying that's what happened to them, I don't think that I believed that would actually happen for me. I thought that I am going to just be combating this desire to drink or this desire to go back to it. And in the way that recovery circle, the way they describe it is like being restored to sanity, right? And so I can have the thought to drink today and nothing happens. Not because of anything that I'm actively doing in response to the thought. Because again, I'm not really attached to thoughts anymore. I don't make it like, oh my God, I'm so bad that I'm thinking about drinking. Like if that thought comes to mind, I just know that it's a thought and it's going to pass, or the feeling is going to pass, just like we said earlier. But, and I know that I've shared this with you before, but like I'm someone who, if you get me on like the roof of a building and I look over the edge, when I was growing up, I was on the 11th story in this building. If I looked off my terrace, I'd look down, a little voice in my head would say, jump.
Yep.
And the fact that I'm hosting the podcast you're listening to today is evidence that I was never insane enough to jump. I never just leapt because the thought jump came to mind, because I wasn't insane in that way. But every single time my brain said drink or get high, I did it. And I did it again and again, despite all of the consequences that happened to me, despite all of the prior experiences that told me, like, this is not a good idea. This is a bad idea. You really shouldn't do it. And despite all the mornings promising myself I'm never going to do it again, I'd be walking down the street, or I'd be walking past a bar, or I just got into a fight with my girlfriend, or I just had a hard day at work, or I just had a great day at work. I just got a raise. Whatever might have happened, if the thought came to mind and it said drink, I would go do it. I had no ability to stop that from happening. I didn't have a choice. And now, if that thought comes to mind, it is as crazy as me jumping off of the building. It is now on par with that degree of insanity. It would be insane for me to do it. So when you think of it from this perspective, and that this is the gift that's been given to me, I've been restored to sanity. I don't have to battle with myself to not jump off the building. You get what I'm saying? If that thought comes, it just doesn't happen. And in the same way, because I've worked this recovery program, the gift is, if the thought happens, I just don't do it, because that would be crazy. It doesn't require any fighting or defense at all. It is as though it's just some power that's been given to me from some external source. Me on my own, I would drink. And me on my own, given everything that's happened over these 18 years, I mean, I've had a friend of mine who I really cared about. She was really awesome. She was sober. She was murdered in a front page of the paper sort of way when I was like 2 years sober, maybe a little less than that. My best friend who was sober, he relapsed. We made 18 months of meetings every day, all the time together. He relapsed. My sponsor, he started taking a medication that hurt him and started taking some other medications that weren't good. He got addicted to them and he wound up dying. My father was diagnosed with cancer, and then 6 months after his diagnosis, he was dead. Like I said, I blew up that marriage. I'm having that all of that shame and the guilt and the remorse of all that and being responsible for it and what everybody would think and just all of that societal kind of stuff. This was before I had really gotten into like being not afraid of what other people think and all of that. And most recently with losing my son, Connor, right? All of those things happening over 18 years, and at very different times, there may have been a thought, drink or get high, and it hasn't happened. And it's not because I'm fighting the thought. It is because I'm just continuing to work this program that pays me in these dividends and these benefits. And it's like, I don't have a choice but to do it. And there's no downside. There's no consequence for doing it. And so if I wasn't doing it, well, life is still going to be life. One of the gifts is the fact that I didn't think that I was going to say this, but as difficult as it was to lose my son and to be in the hospital room and Connor has died, even in that moment, it wasn't a thought of how could this be happening to me? I was free from that thought in that very moment, because these types of things happen to people. It wasn't a, look what happened to me. It was sometimes parents lose children.
Uh-huh.
And so even in that moment, I wasn't attached to what was happening in that way where I took on this, like, making it worse than it had to be, or making it worse by being angry at myself that I didn't speak up more. I didn't say something. I should have pushed for a different thing than the doctor was doing. I was able to examine all of that. Within a week before we had the funeral, I was free of any anger towards myself and any anger at the doctor to get through so that I could just be free to grieve. So I could just grieve without having added rage or added shame and blame. I could just feel the grief and have it be pure. That is crazy, to be able to like have that kind of life circumstance and to have that perspective as a gift. And I really, that it just came to me. I didn't write that anywhere. I wasn't thinking about that at all. But how do you get through these life circumstances? Again, it's like life would still happen. But because I have a recovery program, because I've done this work, and then there's just, here are these things that I still do. When life happens, it's not typically like, it's like, look what's happening to me. It's more of like, look what's happening for me. Now that one was tough, but
you're able to find gifts in these situations that most people would think that there's not many gifts in.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just a big like perspective shift. And then the last one is just adding this on, but the gift of intuition, a gift of this God consciousness where I'm able to like trust what I'm hearing and just do it. And I always wanted to be that kind of person that was like just intuitively knew like what to do and how to do things.
You're an intuition guy.
Yeah, but early on, one of the earliest feelings that I could identify with is like being young, being like, let's say 3rd, 4th grade. So whatever that is, 8, 9 years old, and having that feeling like I am not like everybody else. I'm separate from them. I don't feel like I fit in. I feel like they've got things figured out. I feel like they understand things that I don't know. They all get along. I don't know how to act. I don't know how to be. I don't know, like all that stuff. And meanwhile, where I was the same everything, like I look and sound and act like everybody else around me. It's, you know what I mean? Same socioeconomic background, like same religion, same Irish Catholic descent, all the stuff is very similar. And yet somehow I felt not a part of. I felt different. I felt like I didn't fit in, even though you couldn't have picked a better place to feel like you fit in. If you just if you looked at it.
It's you. This is you. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole environment matched me. Yeah. Couldn't have been any better. And somehow I still feel apart from instead of a part of. And so having that desire to want to have everything be like, to just kind of intuitively know what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act and what you're supposed to, and the 12-step recovery process, it like promises that you're going to have this intuition, you're going to have this God consciousness that starts to develop. It's going to be like a vital sixth sense for you. It's going to be something that's going to work in your life that you're going to be able to really use. And when I think of a sense, like my sixth sense, I think of a sense like vision. Like I probably wouldn't do very much without my vision. I certainly wouldn't drive down the road if all of a sudden my vision was impaired, or if somebody put a blindfold on me, I wouldn't like, oh, let me take to the highway and see how I do, right? So this is like a vital sixth sense that we get to develop. And then once you get like a little bit of a use for it, you start to see it work in a practical way in your life. It's like, well, I wouldn't do without this now. Why would I not? And so it's a practice, no doubt. Yes. And it's not something where it's something that I'm doing all the time. But it's definitely like the next frontier of where this journey is going for me, to be more intuitive and to live more by intuition rather than me forcing things or trying to put my will on things, be more in a flow and be more intuitive. And the best example that I can give for this working is we're doing this very podcast right now. This whole everything, the business, the interventions, providing this service to families, all of it was because initially I answered the call like I probably couldn't have done anything different anyway, like I've said earlier. But when they said we need a counselor down at the FDNY to come down to the EAP and to help us down here, I heard it and it was like, oh, that's me. Like that's going to be me that I'm doing that. And so I showed up and I started doing that, and I started going to school for it to become a counselor and all of that. But really the wheelhouse that I fell into was I'm the guy who's talking to the firefighters who are resistant, hard-headed, obstinate, heels dug in. I don't have a problem. I don't need help. I'm not going anywhere. Screw your rehab. I'm not doing any of this. I don't need help. And somehow I would get through to them. And I would get them into rehab the next day. Most of the time. But some of the time I didn't. And there was one guy who really just was like the first guy that I was like, holy cow, I have nothing. This guy is so locked in to he is not doing anything. And I just could not get through to him. I couldn't break through that denial. And so it was like, how am I going to get through to someone like that? How am I going to figure this out? Like, I got to have something. And I just had this kind of like question that was on my heart that didn't go away. And then one day, now at this point, I'm in the counseling unit and I like live in there. Meaning I'm there all the time. I'm rarely leaving, just popping out to go get lunch. And I come right back. I was like really in it. And so this is like 3 months, 4 months. I never walked around the neighborhood. It was just like, get out, get lunch, come back, if I left at all. And then on this particular day, I have this kind of like this question. It's like, how am I going to get through to somebody like that? How am I going to do this? How am I going to, like, I got to invent something. Like, I got to come up with something. I got to figure this out. And it was just, and I'm walking to go get lunch. And then something out of the clear blue sky says, go up this block. And I've never gone that way before. And so I hang a right turn instead of my usual left. And I start going down this block where there's nothing. There's nothing. This is like residential practically. There's nothing on this block. And I'm walking down the street like as if I'm being guided. And then I come upon a donation, like a Salvation Army kind of place. And it's like, go in. And so I go in. And I don't know what I'm doing here, but they have donated clothes and they have all that stuff, but they also have donated books. And without any kind of directions or all, I just walk in and there's this like silver spiral staircase thing. And I just go right for the staircase and I walk up the stairs. And as I walk up the stairs, as soon as I get to that second level, on a bookshelf, on like a thing that is propping up a single book, on a full bookshelf, all by itself, right in the middle, is a book called No More Letting Go by Deborah J. No More Letting Go, the spirituality of taking action for addiction. I don't even know if that's the actual subtitle, but No More Letting Go is the title of the book. And as soon as I come up the stairs, I'm eye to eye with this lone book on a bookshelf, all by itself. And guys, this is a donation bookstore. There's maybe like 2,000 books in the whole store, and it's donations. It's someone had to donate that book for this book to just happen to randomly be here. This wasn't Barnes & Noble. This was just a random book that someone had donated, and it was positioned for me to find. And I picked up that book, and I read cover to cover faster than any book I ever read, and I was like, she's explaining how to do this. No more letting go. We're not going to just let people with addictions, if you understand addiction, we're not getting help on our own. There is no us hitting bottom and then that automatically translating to us raising our hand and saying, someone please help me. Our default position is we don't have a problem and we don't need any help. So waiting for us to hit bottom and seek help on our own is not something that people with addictions actually do. In the real world, it is an external motivating factor. Something outside of us prompts us and moves us in the direction of getting help, despite the fact that we don't necessarily want it, we don't feel like we need it, we don't think we have a problem, and we weren't necessarily ready to stop. The thing that we all have in common is most of us had no idea 24 to 72 hours before we stopped drinking that these were going to be our last drinks, right? It's not like we planned it. It's not like, okay, 12 hours from now, I'm planning on hitting bottom, boys. So let's start to, that's not what happens, right? But yet it's how everyone thinks it happens. And this book laid it out. And then that led. So that was entirely intuitive. It was completely random. And yet it felt entirely guided to go and do that. I found that book. It is now almost 10 years later. And how many people have we helped get into recovery who otherwise would never have gotten sober? Or at least you could put a likelihood on it that it's unlikely they would have gotten sober. Certainly they wouldn't have gotten sober the day they did if it hadn't been for us being in the room and coaching the whole family and having the family say, will you go to rehab? Would you be willing to go to rehab now? Would you do this? Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone that day. And we've done that now with hundreds of people from that moment of intuition. And if it can be that exciting, it's like you could live this way every day. Like if you check in on a daily basis, and this is the real gift of recovery, it's like if you're not stuck with all of these attachments and all these expectations and all these deep-seated beliefs that haven't been examined at all, and you're free from all of the selfishness and the self-inflicted crisis and the dishonesty and the fears, and that's not what's driving it. And you just have like a clean slate. And then you could get into a prayerful state or a meditation, and you can just ask, what do you got for me today? What would you like me to do? And you don't have as much noise because you have that clean slate now. So you're able to hear it. You're able to hear that voice that says, go down this street. Now, it's not all the time because the clamor starts to build up in my head, but it happens enough to know that this is a real gift. This is a real thing. It's outlined like it's given to us it's in black and white on paper. It says like, this is something you're going to develop this. You're going to have this God consciousness. It's going to come from within. You hear it, check in, do this every day. Do it all the time. Every day is a day we got to carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. So go ahead and do that. And when you do, you're going to be amazed at what happens.
And I do think it's pretty cool how this is you're thinking on these 18, you're thinking about these 18 gifts that have been given to you, right? And that last one is intuition. And when I think of that word and as it pertains to you, right? Like this is your list. These are your gifts. You know what I mean? And I wasn't like, when you first started off with intuition, I really meant that. Like you're an intuition guy. You know what I mean? Like you are, like I can see that. I can see you making that right. You know what I mean? That's just like that's just part of how you move. You know what I mean? And look at it, right? You make the right, boom, there's this book that kind of just changes how we do everything now. You know what I mean? And all comes from this gift of intuition that I really feel like is like your thing. You know what I mean? So in regards to your list, how these gifts pertain to you, I find it pretty cool that you kind of ended with that one, because that really is when I and others think of you, right? That's definitely how it's a big part of your life.
Yeah, one of the things that I realized with intuition, and this will be the closing statement here, is that when I was, and again, this is like the crossing the veil. It's almost like here's this contradictory thing. It's this opposite thing, but you didn't have it all wrong. Like we've heard from, I think, Carl Jung, where he said that alcoholics are trying to drink God out of a bottle, that we're searching and we're seeking, and that we have this discontent. We have this restlessness and this irritability about us that gets solved when I have a drink. It gets solved when I would get high. That restlessness, that irritability, that discontent would go away momentarily, briefly. All of the problems, though, would still be there. And then I have this compounded effect now the problems are there. Plus I've accumulated some new problems from last night, right? And it's only a matter of time before the restlessness and the irritability and discontent return, and I'm going to need another drink or another drug. It's inevitable, right? And so when I was in that state, there was this constant restlessness of as soon as I would start drinking, it would be, okay, now what? Now what do we got to do? What's next? There was never, it was never satisfied, is the point. There was always this, what was more important to me than the drink that I was drinking is the next one. Right? I'm obsessed with getting the next one, getting more. We have to get more. I didn't even finish what I have, but I need more. So it's this restlessness. It's this question of always, now what? Now what? Now what? What's next? Now what? Now what? And alcohol and drugs was never, ever going to satisfy that question, but it fooled me into thinking that it did. It made me feel satisfied enough, but I was always in motion to get the next one until I passed out, or I blacked out, or I threw up and the party's over, whatever, or I get locked up or something. But that restlessness never really gets satisfied.
Yeah, the present just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm thinking of what you're talking about, right? Like that. All right, what's next? Where are we getting more from, right? Like the sitting on the couch, like that. There's no presence. You know what I mean? It's all scheming to figure out what's next, and that present moment is just gone.
Right. So that's the tragedy. That's what's so tragic about it, right? Is that we're seeking God out of a bottle and we get close, but we can never, ever make it to the present moment and have any kind of peace and serenity because it's always about the next one. It's always about what's next. And then you work a recovery program and you have your whole life transformed. You become practically like a new person. And then the only way I can describe this again is this idea of like crossing the veil. And now I'm in this realm of the spirit. Instead of chasing this spirit of alcohol over here, now I'm connected to the actual spirit, the source spirit, and have this God consciousness. And this is where I discover this peace and this serenity, this calm. And the question is, now what? But now it feels, that was always the right question. But now that I'm in the realm of the spirit and the power that I'm relying on is the higher power, I say, okay, God, now what? And then that's where the intuition comes in. And God says, okay, call this guy. And I go, oh, okay. And I call him and he goes, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. And all I did was follow directions. I didn't think to call him on my own. It wasn't entirely random. I said, okay, God, now what do you got? What's next? But it feels entirely different than how it used to be when I was in active addiction. So it was the right question, but the wrong power. Now the alignment is right question, right power, and I am always going to have a sense of satisfaction on the other side of it. That's the gift of that intuition, is when I say now what, God says, okay, great, now this. And then you do it and you're like, wow, that was great. Like, what, some great thing just happened. That was amazing. Like, I was able to be helpful and somebody's whatever. But that's the difference. And yeah, so that's my final gift of what I said was 18, but we probably racked up somewhere 23, 24, who knows. But I really appreciate anybody that's listening, that you've taken this journey, and we can't help but be helpful, as you've heard us say. So if you need any help, please don't get in the way of that. If you're intuitively thinking we should be connecting with these guys, we are approachable. We are available. We are reachable. So reach out, visit the Y Intervention website, get on the email list, connect with us whatever way you can if you feel called to do it. And we'll be happy to help in any way we can. Dan, thanks a lot. Appreciate you. This was a good one, a long one.
Christopher, congrats on 18 years and 18 gifts, 24 gifts.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been great. It's been real.